Some nights feel heavier than others. The kind of heavy that doesn't sit on your chest, but sinks somewhere deeper, where you can't quite name it. That night, I lay staring at the ceiling while the blue glow of my phone slowly dimmed in my hand. I had sent Mark a message hours earlier. Just a simple, "Are you coming over?" And the only reply I got was a single word: late. No apology. No explanation. Just late. It wasn't always like this. At least, I kept telling myself that. I told myself he used to try harder, used to notice when I went quiet, used to ask if I was okay instead of assuming I always would be. But lately, I felt more like a habit than a partner. Something he checked in on when it fit his schedule. The apartment was quiet in that soft, hollow way that makes every sound feel louder. The hum of the fridge, the faint tick of the clock. Ryan was gone for the weekend, visiting family, which meant the place felt bigger and lonelier than usual. I rolled onto my side and pressed my phone against my chest like it might warm me with the attention I wasn't getting. That's when the front door opened. At first, I thought I imagined it. Then I heard voices, low, laughing. Ryan's voice was missing, but there was no mistaking the other one. Lucas, Ryan's best friend, the one who came around unannounced, filled every room with noise, and somehow made even silence feel less empty. I sat up as the familiar sound of his laugh drifted down the hallway. A moment later, there was a knock on my bedroom door that didn't wait for permission before opening. "Wow," Lucas said, leaning against the frame, half smiling. "You look like someone who lost an argument with his pillow." I let out a short breath that could have been a laugh. "It's winning," I said. "By a lot." He stepped inside without being invited, like he always did. There was something effortless about him, about the way he took up space without making it feel crowded. He glanced around, then back at me. "You okay?" he asked. It was such a simple question, and somehow it caught me off guard. "Yeah," I lied automatically. Lucas raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. "Ryan ditched me for family stuff," he said. "Figured I'd stop by instead of talking to myself all night." "You talk to yourself?" I asked. "Only the interesting parts," he replied. We stood there for a second, the quiet settling between us again. Then he sighed and gestured toward the hall. "I'm grabbing water. Don't look so thrilled." I didn't realize how tight my chest had been until he left the room and the air shifted again. When he came back, he handed me a glass like it was the most natural thing in the world to take care of someone in the middle of the night. "So," he said, sitting on the edge of my bed without asking, "where's Mr. Always Busy tonight?" "Working," I said. "Apparently." He nodded slowly, not judging, just listening. "You sound like you don't believe that." "I sound like I'm tired," I said. Lucas studied me for a moment, his expression softer than usual. "You don't have to be," he said quietly. Something in my throat tightened. I looked away before he could see it. The room grew quieter after that. Not awkward, just still. The kind of quiet where you can hear your own breathing and suddenly become aware of how alone you feel. Then Lucas did something I didn't expect. "Well," he said lightly, standing up and stretching. "Ryan always says his worst nightmare is walking in and finding me in your bed. So maybe I should commit to the bit." Before I could process what he meant, he moved closer and, with exaggerated care, climbed onto the far edge of my bed, fully dressed, shoes still on. He folded his hands over his chest like he was posing. "There," he said. "Terrifying." I stared at him. "You're ridiculous." "That's my charm." I should have told him to get up. I should have laughed it off properly and rolled away. But something held me in place. Maybe it was the way the mattress dipped slightly under his weight. Maybe it was how the room suddenly felt warmer. "Relax," he added more softly. "It's just a joke." I nodded, even though my heart was suddenly doing something reckless in my chest. I turned onto my side, facing the wall, leaving a careful distance between us. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then, slowly, cautiously, I felt the lightest pressure as Lucas shifted. His arm rested behind me, not touching it first, just close enough that I could feel the heat of him through the space between us. "You're shaking," he murmured. "I'm fine," I said again, weaker this time. His arm moved then, not pulling me in, not claiming anything, just settling around me like a quiet question. I froze. He waited. When I didn't pull away, he stayed. The rain began tapping against the window, soft and steady. The world outside faded into a blur of sound and shadow. For the first time in months, I felt held. Not in a way that asked for anything. Not in a way that took. Just in a way that meant I wasn't alone in the dark. My phone lit up briefly on the nightstand. Another message from Mark. Too late. The glow faded unanswered. Lucas's arm tightened just slightly, steady and warm. It was meant to be nothing more than a joke, but somehow, in that quiet moment, I felt less alone than I had in months. Morning came slowly, soft light spilling through the blinds and casting stripes across the bed. I woke first, the warmth of the covers next to me still lingering where Lucas had rested. His side was empty now, but the weight of the night didn't leave me. I couldn't shake the quiet calm that had settled over me while he was there. My chest felt lighter, but my mind buzzed with confusion. I heard the faucet running in the kitchen and knew Lucas was already up, moving through the apartment with that easy confidence he carried. I wrapped myself in a blanket and padded down the hall, trying to remind myself that nothing had really happened. It was just a joke, just a fleeting, ridiculous moment. But somehow, my heart didn't agree with that logic. It had noticed. It had registered warmth and care, things that had been absent from my relationship for months. Lucas leaned against the counter, casually stirring coffee. He looked up as I entered, smiled softly, and nodded. "Morning," he said, his voice low and familiar. Nothing flirtatious, nothing demanding, just comforting. I felt a small, unexpected flutter of something I couldn't name. "Morning," I replied, forcing the word into neutrality. My own voice sounded strange to me, distant, like it didn't belong. The day passed with the quiet tension of things unsaid. Mark's messages came sporadically, brief, distracted, missing the little details of life. He asked nothing about me, nothing about how I felt. And each time my phone buzzed, I felt a pang of disappointment, a small ache that settled deeper each time I read his cold, distant words. Meanwhile, Lucas seemed to find subtle ways to be there without pressing. A cup of tea left beside me, a message asking if I had eaten, a brief knock with a soft, "Hey, just checking in." Every gesture was small, innocent, almost invisible, but somehow it meant everything. And with each act, I felt myself leaning closer emotionally, without moving a muscle, without breaking any visible boundary. That night, the storm came, drumming against the windows with steady insistence. The lights flickered, and we ended up in the living room, lit only by the faint glow of candles I had hastily grabbed from the kitchen. Lucas sat across from me, hands wrapped around a mug, staring into the flames. I realized I had been watching him too, noticing the way the light softened his features, the way he seemed so unbothered by the chaos outside. The conversation started lightly, but soon we found ourselves speaking about fears we rarely voiced. Mine spilled out, the loneliness I had been ignoring, the way Mark's absence made me question my own worth. Lucas listened without judgment, without interruption. His quiet attention was a balm I hadn't known I was craving. Each word I spoke felt safer in his presence. Each sigh met with an understanding nod. And then came the guilt. It settled on me like the storm outside, heavy and unavoidable. I hadn't crossed any physical line yet. No touch beyond casual proximity. No kiss. No intimate gesture. And still, I felt like a traitor. My heart was slipping toward someone who had done nothing wrong, but simply listened. I realized that emotional infidelity could hurt just as deeply as physical betrayal, and my stomach twisted at the thought of Mark discovering how far I had drifted. Later, as the storm intensified, the power went out. Lucas found me in the dim light of the hallway, trying not to stumble. He offered his hand, steadying me, and I took it, trembling. We didn't speak. We just stood there, hand in hand, the silence filled with more emotion than words could carry. Eventually, we ended up on the couch, a blanket wrapped loosely around both of us, not touching beyond what the blanket held, not leaning into each other in any intentional way, but close enough to feel the other's warmth. Foreheads nearly met as we talked quietly, confessing fears, laughing softly at small absurdities, sharing memories we hadn't dared tell anyone else. Every second felt dangerous, and yet safe. Each laugh, each pause, each tiny gesture reminded me how much I had been missing. I wanted to pull back, to preserve some sense of loyalty. And yet, I felt myself leaning in, craving the understanding and care that Mark had refused to offer. Before we drifted apart that night, Lucas said quietly, almost to himself, "You don't have to be alone in this." And I realized that even without breaking any physical rule, my heart had already started bending toward him, toward a comfort I had thought impossible. The lines were blurry, the tension tangible, and the storm outside seemed to echo the turbulence inside me. I hadn't crossed the line physically yet, but emotionally, I was already on the edge, and I couldn't tell if I wanted to step back or fall forward. The next few days were tense. Mark's messages were short, clipped, and increasingly impatient. He noticed my distance, though he didn't ask why. There was no warmth in his words, only the sharp edges of frustration. Each ping from him felt heavier than the last, a reminder that I had been withdrawing, without explanation. And though I tried to focus on work, on routines, even on small hobbies, my mind kept returning to the nights with Lucas, the quiet conversations, the soft comfort, the sense that someone finally saw me. I tried to push it away, reasoning that it was just loneliness, just temporary, just because Ryan was away. But the truth gnawed at me. Emotional attachment wasn't something you could turn off like a faucet. It built quietly, imperceptibly, until one day it became undeniable, and I could no longer ignore that I had been giving parts of my heart to someone else, even without touching, without crossing a physical line. It wasn't long before Mark confronted me. The message came in the middle of the afternoon. "We need to talk. Now." His tone was sharp, controlled, and for once demanding attention. I felt a sick knot in my stomach. I knew this wasn't just about a small distance or a forgotten plan. He had felt it too. I met him at our usual spot in the apartment, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mark, don't," he interrupted, his voice low but tense. "I already know. You're distant. I've seen it. I've felt it. I've asked and you don't tell me. What's going on?" I swallowed hard, the weight of truth pressing against my chest. I've been leaning on someone else," I admitted. "Not physically, not in any way but emotionally. I needed someone to listen, and Mark cut me off, frustration and hurt warring in his eyes. "And you couldn't tell me? You couldn't come to me when we had this problem?" "I tried," I said softly, "but it wasn't enough. I needed more, and I didn't know how to say it." He shook his head, the disappointment palpable. "I can't do this anymore. Not if you've been giving your heart to someone else." The confrontation left me hollow. I felt guilt, relief, and sorrow all at once. Ending things with Mark was painful, but necessary. I realized then that staying in a relationship where emotional neglect overshadowed care would only continue the cycle of hurt. In the quiet aftermath, Lucas didn't immediately reach out. He gave me space, respecting boundaries, even though I could feel the unspoken connection lingering. Days passed, and I understood something important. Emotional bonds were powerful, but they required honesty, clarity, and responsibility. Finally, when I was ready, I called him. His voice came through the line, tentative, warm. "Evan." "Lucas," I said. I need to see you. To talk. Not just texts." He agreed immediately. When I arrived at his place, I felt that same flutter I had felt the first night, but now it was tempered by understanding. We didn't rush, didn't pretend anything was simple. We sat, side by side, in the soft glow of his living room light, and spoke honestly about everything. About my relationship with Mark, about the emotional confusion, about loneliness, about fear. Lucas listened. He asked questions, not to probe, but to understand. And I realized that what had started as a joke, a moment of accidental closeness, had grown into something fragile and real, not because it was spontaneous, but because it was nurtured through honesty and care. There was a moment when our hands brushed, and we paused. Nothing more than a gentle touch, almost accidental. My heart leapt, and I saw him smile. Not teasing, not demanding, just soft, safe. I understood then that love didn't need to be loud, didn't need to cross boundaries to be meaningful. Weeks later, we began rebuilding slowly. Dates were quiet walks, shared meals, late-night conversations that didn't replace, but complemented the love I had been missing. Trust was rebuilt deliberately, with intention, and boundaries were respected. We weren't rushing toward anything, because we knew that true connection wasn't measured in moments of impulse. It was measured in consistent care, in listening, in showing up. I thought back to that first night, the night he had slipped into my bed as a joke. I realized that it had been a turning point, yes, but not because of what happened in that small, silly moment. It mattered because it opened my heart to honesty, to noticing what I was missing, to understanding what real love could feel like. And for the first time in months, I felt at peace. I had been seen. I had been heard. I had made choices, faced consequences, and still found the possibility of joy. What started as a joke had shown me the truth. Love isn't about chance moments or accidental closeness. It's about presence, attention, and care. And in that truth, I finally found something real,